All right. My name is Rich Schmidt. We're here with John Casteel. It's May 31st, 2024. We're at Casteel Custom Bottling in McMinnville. John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
First question is, why wine?
Well, I grew up on a vineyard. My father was a winemaker. Now retired. My older brother is the winemaker now, but it was just working in the vineyard as a kid, spending my summers working in the winery, helping my dad hand bottle wine. And then I think coming out of high school, I went to community college for a bit, never graduated, but my brother was working full-time at Rex Hill Winery as the warehouse manager, and he just got me a summer job. That's the first, I'll scratch that. I actually worked for Flynn Vineyards a little bit in my summers as a kid, but I guess second real job at another winery other than my family's. And I don't know. I was very interested more in the production side, I guess, than the actual winemaking side. I've always been a bit of a gearhead, I guess. I kind of got more into the machinery, the presses, the, bottling, obviously. It was the most advanced piece of equipment we had in the cellar. But, it just really interested me. And growing up, my dad, just his passion for wine. And I don't know. Maybe you could say it's in my blood. I don't know. That's a hard one to answer.
Well, tell me a little bit about growing up in the industry. You mentioned, obviously, working in the vineyard, working in the winery. What were some of your kind of early memories of being in the industry as a child?
Yeah, I think the thing that I always thought was amazing to me was, my family being, they planted in the 70s, and it was kind of just, obviously David Lett, I think he was the first one to plant grapes here in the late 60s, but it was kind of, Oregon was just becoming this thing with wine, and my family would get together with other winemaking families and barbecue and taste each other's wines, and it was just a very, they were all very humble and very, it was all exciting, I guess. It was kind of, and all of them, or most of the people that I've met that were friends with my family were all, had some other career in life, they were a college professor or they were, whatever it was, but it was, at some point they just all decided to drop everything and try to make wine in Oregon, which to me was kind of amazing. I don't think I could just stop a career path like that, just dead in its tracks and totally go another direction. So I thought they were all pretty amazing people, and like I said, very humble, not that there aren't still those people in the industry, but I feel like it's, people don't share their secrets as much, or maybe they think they figured out some clue to winemaking that hasn't been discovered in, all these years. But it was a lot like just a big family barbecue with all these, different and big faces that you hear of in the industry, Ken Wright and a lot of growers, a lot of growers. The folks at Freedom Hill, the Duchets, have been big family friends for years, and even Cody Wright with Ken Wright's son, I bottle his wine now. I think it's crazy. He and I are the same age, and we both somehow managed to stay in the industry, and even though I'm on a different side of it, but yeah, hopefully that wasn't too all over the place.
It's perfect.
Yeah.
Tell me about the idea of, you mentioned the kind of the mechanical, the gearhead. Tell me about, at what point did that become something you were interested in, and how did it kind of first manifest in wine work?
Well, I also just think it was something that I've always been pretty good at. I think we all try to find that, niche for ourselves in life. But, my dad would work with my brother and I on winemaking and wine tasting, and I do think I have a pretty good palate, and obviously not as good as my brother, but when it came to things breaking or things like that, I saw it as a challenge, that, and you really get that feeling of accomplishment when you fix it and it's running well. And I had a lot of that experience at Bethel Heights because my family didn't believe in spending money, so there's always broken things around, you know. And then when I got to work at Rex Hill, it was just all the equipment that I'd seen growing up was so much bigger, and you know, it went from a less than 10,000 case winery to a 50,000 case winery, and now they're whatever, almost 500,000 cases. But yeah, and I guess yeah, it was just I was always interested in the mechanics of everything, how the why and you know, how it worked, and I always thought it was kind of, the engineering behind it was kind of amazing to me. Like, who thought of this? That, you know, to build this thing to do what it does, like a destemmer, that actually a machine that will pull all the berries off the clusters, and you know, the way the wine presses work, and then obviously eventually the bottling line. You know, I think that was a big challenge that somebody, you know, had basically abandoned at Rex Hill, and I was always kind of drawn to it, and eventually they just asked me if I wanted to do it, and I was able to take this old machine that had been beat on for years, and you know, and we actually took it to it was called Scholes and Associates back then. I think they're still around, and they had a mechanic there that was really good, and I just said, well, if you want me to take on this job as the bottling manager, I want to take this machine and I want to completely rebuild it, and I want to offer myself up as free labor to do so. So I went up there, and Bill and I ripped that thing all the way down and rebuilt the whole thing, and it was a amazing learning experience for me. I did, obviously was doing most of the grunt work, and you know, coming home greasy and whatever every day, but I just thought it was kind of amazing, and he was, you know, he was a smart ass, but he was a good teacher. He taught me a lot. And he still is. I still call him every once in a while, even though we're somewhat considered competitors, you know. So, but yeah, I think I was just to go back to what your original question was, I think I was just always interested about the engineering and how things were built, and yeah, it always kind of just triggered my mind, I guess.
So tell me about the path at Rex Hill then, from just kind of summer temporary job into to bottling manager, and to taking a machine apart like that. Tell me about the rest of your time there and how it went from that point.
Yeah, so eventually, I think I was 22 or 23. They offered me the job of cellar master. So I had that job. It was, yeah, I was there cellar master for about 7 years. Which was good, but then it became managing people. Never really much liked being a boss. I think my problem is I always get to be friends with people, and then it's hard to be the hammer that has to come down and say, hey, you need to get to work or get off your phone or whatever it is, you know. You get that, what, I thought we were friends, you know, kind of thing. But yeah, and it was good. You know, I had a great experience at Rex Hill. I worked under both Lynn Penner-Ash and then the late Aaron Hess, and mostly with Aaron. And he was a very committed man. You know, he was driven to just. We would work crazy hours because he would not let fruit sit out, you know, in the sun very long or whatever it was. He was very committed and taught me a lot, you know. And I think, you know, and eventually it was kind of during the A to Z transition when Rex Hill sold. Paul Hart, also, I have to say, the owner of Rex Hill, the original owner, was just a really great man. Really gave me a lot of opportunities, really believed in me. Would come and say things like, I just never seen these machines operate as well as they have until John was here. You know, I always got a lot of pats on the back from him, and that meant a lot for a guy that was pretty hands-off. And, you know, I think it was, and the folks with A to Z are great. You know, I worked with Sam and Cheryl and everybody there. It was just the growth pattern. It just kind of, for me, it was like, okay, this is not really what I was trying to do. It gets, and then more and more employees, you know, I'm like, okay, now I have to manage all these people, and we're working swing shifts, and, you know, yeah, it just kind of got to be a lot. And I was just always thinking, you know, I see these mobile bottling trailers, and there was just one company that did it around here. It was called Signature Mobile Bottling, and they're a very large company, but it was always like, man, they don't have any competition to me, which I always thought was strange. So originally I actually went to and was approached by a couple wineries because I got to have somewhat of a reputation, I guess, as somebody that was mechanical and knew bottling. And they were kind of like, originally it was like 2 or 3 wineries that were like, hey, what if we all buy a trailer and we hire John to run it? And Bethel Heights, my family, was one of these wineries. And then we were sitting around discussing it as a family, and I think it was my cousin Mimi that was just like, well, why don't we just buy it? You know, and so, yeah, they really, you know, we put together a plan, and my original plan was that Signature uses really large reefer trailers. You know, they're full-size 53-foot trailers, and you look around the valley and it's just, there's a lot of smaller wineries that are tucked in these hillsides or their driveways or whatever. Is hard to get a large truck like that into. So I kind of hunted around and I found a bottling trailer that was already built by a company called Slow Bottling, SLO, out of San Luis Obispo, California. And met a great still friend of mine, Jose Cuevas, and they were selling their trailer, but they didn't want to sell it to a competitor in California. Yeah. So I approached them, and they're like, well, I guess if you're going to Oregon, you know, I just don't want to see this thing cruising down the road around here. And I just on a handshake, I said, look, man, I promise I'm not coming to California. I think I have enough work in Oregon. But it was a smaller trailer. My cousin Jesse nicknamed it the Silver Bullet. I don't know why, but it was definitely kind of a low profile, you know, gooseneck truck and trailer, very sharp looking, and my plan was not to just go out and try to take customers from Signature, but to try to target the ones that they just couldn't get to. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of how, and then it was going out and putting on the, you know, the nice shirt and knocking on doors until I could find work, you know, which was not easy. You know, like I said, I had somewhat of a reputation, but I was very young, and a lot of people just kind of looking at me like, oh, do you even know what you're doing? You know, and so I really just had to like, hey, just give me a chance, you know, and I promise I won't disappoint. And a few people kind of bid on, and then, you know, it was, and then I think that's the cool thing about the industry is like that song says, I heard it through the grapevine. It's just like, all these guys are wine drinking buddies. So they're like, you know, hey, who do you use for bottling? You know, I use John, and, you know, he actually did a good job. And I actually didn't really have to do much marketing of myself or my company after that point. And, yeah, and then years, gosh, it must have been 5 years went by. I trained an operator that worked with me every day. Still works for me. Great guy, you know, and he's a family friend. His mom actually manages the tasting room at Bethel Heights and babysat me when I was a kid. So, yeah, funny how all these things happen. But, you know, he got to the point where he could basically run that trailer without me. So I decided, hey, I'm going to build another one. And so I actually built the second one, you know, from, not, I wouldn't say from scratch, but, you know, I bought a trailer. I did have to have some help. I'm not a welder. I'm not an electrician. And I had somebody kind of do the schematic drawing for me, and I just went out and found the equipment, and we put it all together at a place called Associated Wine Systems, Prospero in Windsor, California. And then I drove it up here, and I ran that trailer for, geez, about 5 years. And then Josh's helper, Ryan, Josh was my original operator, kind of got to the point where he was ready to run a truck. And for a lot of these guys, it's like once they're an operator, it's the pay raise and everything else. But yeah, so eventually I was able to step away from both trucks, which was nice, you know. But then I guess it's just me. I probably could have just gone out fishing every day or golfing and, you know, been semi-retired at a young age. But I had this idea of the facility. Just to backtrack a bit, was after Rex Hill, I took a harvest job in New Zealand, and I worked for a very large company called Montana in Gisborne, and we did 20,000 tons of fruit, and that was a bad year for them. They actually got hit with frost that year. Was that 2002? Yeah, it's been a while. But when I was in New Zealand, that was one of the things I asked. I was just kind of like, I don't see a bottling line here, and this is a huge winery. And I'm like, do you guys have mobile bottling trucks? And they're like, no, we all send our wine to a bottling facility down the street, and that's what everybody does unless they own their own line. And I just said, wow, that's kind of an interesting idea, just for people to send their wine down the road to some, facility to have it packaged. But obviously this was a very large winery. But it just kind of got me thinking, I guess, when I got back here, like, there's companies in Oregon like 12th and Maple or Northwest Wines that, they have bottling equipment there, but their main focus is custom crush. They kind of the bin to bottle kind of idea. And I always just kind of thought, wow, wouldn't it be just to focus on the bottle and not so much the bin kind of thing, and just offer packaging. But that was definitely a tougher go than the mobile thing. People had a really hard time wrapping their head around a tanker truck, their wine sloshing around going down the road, and the best way I could explain it to them is like, well, you think of a tanker truck, the trailer is just like a very large bottle of wine. You're shipping wine across the country, and it's sloshing around, and it's doing all these things that you're concerned about. And once again, it was just like with the mobile truck. I think it was really hard to get people to take that first step, but once they did, and it was just also thinking of with the mobile bottling, we have daily minimums. It's a lot to drag that trailer out somewhere and set it up. And if somebody only has 200 cases to bottle, that would take us an hour to do. I have to justify our day of work and my operator and everything else. So it's been a nice. It offered an option for people that just like, hey, I really need to bottle this wine, John, but I don't want to pay you to bring your trailer out here. People have wines that are delicate or they need to be bottled now. They can't wait 5 months, So it was another way to kind of fill that gap, I think, and then larger bottlings that people don't have a tank large enough to blend in, or they don't have the floor space to handle 10,000 cases of glass in their winery, or racking that much and everything they have to do. So that's where the facility idea kind of came to me.
I'm going to go back to the pre-facility. I have questions about the facility too. Let's back up to the trucks for a moment. Obviously, you mentioned you bought the first one. You bought the first one used. You when you're building the second one, tell me, what did you learn anything from the first that you implemented in the second? Did you change up the second truck at all?
I did. The first trailer is, like I said, it's a smaller trailer. And so everything's very compact in there. And one thing you can't fit into some of these smaller trailers with low ceilings is like distributors for applying a capsule or applying a screw cap. So we hand apply, and it requires the wineries to provide more labor. It also, depending on who you're working with, capsules are very, very delicate. You may have, somebody in there that's just kind of smashing them on the bottle. But that was one of the big focuses, I guess, is I actually had this trailer custom made with, higher ceilings to accommodate distributors. The other thing is that I ran into this issue with my original trailer because it is a low profile. That's a lot of wineries have loading docks, and they want to bottle off their loading dock because their bottling room or wherever their warehouse where they store all their packaging is right there. And my competitors all have dock height trailers, so it was kind of, I can bring something in that, I can still work with whoever it is, And it was nice to have the two. The second trailer is a 48-foot reefer trailer, and my original trailer is like a 38-foot low profile gooseneck trailer. So it was, depending on what client or where we're going, it was kind of, we had something that could accommodate basically everyone, was the thought.
Tell me about the kind of the cyclical year for one of your trailers. What is being done in each part of the year, and how do you keep them running?
Yeah, you mean like as far as maintenance and so?
When are they being heavily used, and what are you doing to kind of maintain them throughout the year?
So our busiest times of the year for bottling would be kind of getting into like spring white wines, rosés. That kind of kicks off. I mean, it used to be like mid-February. Now it seems like we start around end of January, and pretty full on until around the end of April. And then May and June are kind of a bit of a slow time. And then our busiest time of the year, being in Oregon with Pinot Noir, is starting July, August, and even partway through September. We used to actually bottle all the way to the end of September and into October, but now the harvest seems to be coming earlier and earlier every year. So, and then obviously during harvest, that's when my guys take a little vacation. I'm sure they wish it was in the summertime, but we do a pretty big annual maintenance. I have a full-time maintenance manager here. It used to be me that did all that, but I've hired someone that's he's really good, so we do a lot of just wear parts. A lot of these machines, they're stainless steel, but they have brass bushings or a wear part that we would remove and replace, even if it doesn't need to be replaced. And a lot of my employees have looked at me funny, like, John, you're just throwing good money in the garbage, but I can't afford to break down, is the biggest thing. It would just snowball. The schedule gets so tight, especially in the summertime. If we have to push back, we're just pushing these guys closer and closer to harvest, and they're freaking out, So we do our big annual maintenance like October, November, and then we do another kind of just like O-rings and a deep cleaning kind of thing. Obviously these machines are sterilized and cleaned every time they're used, but I guess maybe it's my OCD. I just like to get in, and I like everything to look nice. Being from the wine industry, I think that's something that I notice anytime I step foot into anyone's winery is how clean it is. And I think I'm big on that here at the facility. I'm big on that with my mobile trucks, because when these winemakers or winery owners step foot inside, I think that gives you a definite comfortable feeling, knowing that it's clean. If it's dirty and it smells or whatever, they're gonna be like, yeah, no thanks, I'm not gonna put my wine in here. And so yeah, there's a lot of that, even just polishing walls, whatever it is. I really want people to feel like we're professional, and these machines are cleaned and well maintained.
So speaking of the machines, tell me about the familiarity with them. Obviously, you worked at a bottling line. You have familiarity with all those, but I imagine machines are changing, they're evolving, new things are coming along. So tell me about that. Tell me about new machines and staying up to date.
Yeah, so there is obviously technology, and people advancing all over the place. But so with the still machines that we use, the mechanical valve fillers, not a lot has changed on those over the years. More cosmetic stuff than anything, I think. Sometimes I feel like they're also reinventing the wheel a bit. It's kind of like, like I use a lot of Guy equipment, and Carlo Guy, who made the first, Guy bottling line back in the, 40s or whenever it was. They used this big heavy cast, steel, and it's all painted, and now everything's thin and stainless and shiny, but it's it's his great grandson now, and he really wants to go make a name for himself, and a lot of that. But it's and I see things on some of the equipment that I bought, or I go to equipment trade shows, and I just see things that I feel like are unnecessary changes or make it more. I guess I look at it a lot like with vehicles now. It's gotten to the point now where on my new truck, it's if there's an issue, I have to take it to the dealership because, me trying to work on that, I would just rip my hair out. And I think they design these things a bit in a way where they make a little money on the back end, of course. But yeah, and but now we've gotten into counter pressure filling, which was a bit of a learning curve for me. I had the idea when I started the facility that you don't see any forced carbonated wine really in Oregon, and it's something big in other parts of the world. In Europe it's huge, and even in California. But that was a big learning curve for me. Obviously there's a lot of people that do method champenois, but and there's another company that offers that service. I'm not really interested in getting into that. It's a lot of work, a lot of space, a lot of time. But yeah, learning that technology of counter pressure filling. But now there's the new thing is now is these electro-pneumatic fillers. So it's a lot more electronics, and for me, I'm pretty mechanical. I can get by a little bit on the electrical side, but I feel like some of it's just so heavily engineered. It's like, okay, if this one little contactor goes out, you're not bottling, and we stock a lot of parts here. But the big focus, I think, with that and why a lot of the folks in the wine industry have taken an interest is because of everyone, especially nowadays. When my dad was making wine, I don't even think half the people even sparged their bottles with nitrogen. But now the big focus is this dissolved oxygen level in your wine, and a lot of people associate that with consistency. Also, I think there's some people feeling that it has something to do with what they call bottle shock. I haven't seen any real data to back that up, more just kind of winemaker opinion, which there's a lot of that. Yeah, the machines are just very expensive. I've heard of a few people try to put these electro-pneumatics in mobile trailers. I don't think they're very well designed for that. Like I said, I think they're just a very finicky design. Mm-hmm. I've thought about putting one in here, but it's kind of, it's like basically twice the price. So it's a hard leap for somebody like me that's working on borrowed money. So, yeah. But yeah, as far as the changes in the machinery that I use, yeah, that's kind of the one big new step I've seen, and a lot of people are really pushing it, of course. And I get it. You talk mostly in with my equipment and what we run. People, it gets down to parts per million for DO, but in these machines they can get it down to parts per billion, which is to me unreal. It's really taken off in the beer industry. I was a home brewer at one point, but I'm not as familiar with beer as I am with wine. But they really want that oxygen level low, and I think it also helps a lot with the carbonation process. Something I've been learning. I feel like I still learn something new every day. So, yeah.
You talked about some of the initial challenges of just sort of like people trusting you on the mobile bottling truck. Tell me about learning curve. You have the truck. You got some customers. What were the biggest sort of initial obstacles or biggest initial things you had to learn, early mistakes or early challenges that you had to deal with before you kind of felt like you had it nailed?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is because winemakers only, most of them anyway, only bottle, once, maybe twice a year. It's kind of reteaching them the process, and I would just kind of assume, oh yeah, they have their nitrogen, they have this, they have all that. But it was a lot of me just reaching out, like, hey, are you sure you're ready? You have all this. And, obviously there's those people that are out there just all over it. And then there's the other ones that are like, oh yeah, I forgot to do that. And it's the schedule, like I said, especially in the summer months, we get so busy. If people miss their window, it's tough to get them back in later, or I have to give up a weekend or something to do that. That, and I just I wasn't in the beginning. I definitely wasn't able to be very picky about who I work with, but I really, I have a really good relationship with most of my clients. You know, I consider most of them friends, and I really just like to work with good people. You know, people that respect and appreciate what I do as much as I do them. You know, there's always going to be people that going to treat you like an employee, you know, or whatever it is. You know, finding those good relationships is important. And those are the ones that I really feel like last. You know, it's those are the clients I've had since I've started, and some other bottler would show up at their door and hand them a pamphlet. They'd actually just hand it to me when I saw them. They're like, "Yeah, this joker came by," you know, which is really cool. You know, it's that's one thing I think is really amazing about the Oregon wine industry is it is really full of some really great people. You know, and they really care about all their, you know, all the people they work with. But as far as any other challenges, I just, you know, like I said, I think in the beginning I struggled a little bit to find business, but then once I did, I didn't really have to do much after that. It just all kind of started to flood in. I was very lucky that way.
So tell me about designing this facility. Obviously, you mentioned that this was something you didn't have to do. You thought this was a good idea. You saw the potential here. So tell me about finding the space and designing what you wanted to design to kind of take the next step.
Yeah, it definitely was a challenge. Before I started this facility, I leased a building a couple blocks from here. It was just a 10,000 square foot warehouse. Much lower ceilings in here, which is, you know, there was some learning curves. I'm actually glad that I rented a space before I built my own. And there's always going to be things that I wish I would have done different. Yeah, and you know, it was funny when I first started. I was like, okay, I'll just put a machine here, and then I just need, you know, 2 tanks, one to, you know, fill and then filter out of and bottle out of. But then it's like, okay, well, how do you deal with all the other things coming and going? And yeah, it was definitely a learning process all along the way. But you know, I think my big focus was with the forced carbonation. You know, I just thought that it was kind of a if you build it, they will come kind of idea. And that was 7 years ago, and I feel like we're just now really kind of hitting the peak of that, which is kind of interesting. I think it just, those that bid onto it and did it was like, you know, yeah, I'll do some rosé, bubbly rosé, and release it for Valentine's Day or whatever it is, and sell it out of my tasting room. And they would all come back the next year. Yeah, I want to do double. That was, you know, we sold that like, you know, right away. But yeah, it was slow to start. Then I had to put in a still line just to kind of keep up and really focus a lot with my mobile clients. Like, hey, you know, do you want to send your Willamette Valley over here? You know, and so I know it's a challenge for you to do that here, but a lot of that, I don't know, John. Like, I don't feel comfortable putting my wine on a truck or taking it somewhere else. You know, that's their baby, you know, and so it's hard to let go. You know, it's kind of like, yeah, their teenager just got their driver's license or something. You know? But you know, it definitely took some time and a lot of money and a lot of patience. But you know, when I finally built this building and designed it, you know, it was a lot of the focus of just, you know, how do you do that? You know, my original thought was, okay, maybe we have, you know, bottling equipment in the middle, and we have like receiving tanks, and then, you know, the finished packaging, or you even have a dry goods side and then your finished goods on this side, and things kind of travel this direction, like they flow through. But trying to do that and set up separate warehouses, and then where do you put office space, and where do you put these things? And so in the end, I just kind of decided, you know, we're going to start with our receival tanks and filtration here, and set our bottling lines up basically like how we do in the mobile truck, where it's in a U shape. It just comes in on this side and comes out on that side. You know, you can flow conveyor any way you want. You know, you go into some of these large companies, like if, you know, Coca-Cola, I mean, you know, they have humongous facilities, and things are traveling through different parts of the building before they finally end up where they go. It's pretty amazing. But I, you know, and I thought about hiring somebody. You know, there's some local guys, architects, that have helped design a lot of wineries. for production, not even just, wine, it could have been hazelnuts or whatever it was, like how do we make things flow? And I spent a lot of time scratching my head thinking about that, and in the end I just decided, we're just going to kind of do it how we do on the truck, but it's all going to be inside a building. And obviously the biggest thing I learned from the first space I leased is we need a lot more space, especially on the warehouse side. And also trying to keep all of that separate and loading docks away from production. In my old facility, it was kind of all mixed in the middle, and it was just a little bit dangerous in a way. I'd have people walking to the bathroom and somebody's backing up at the forklift, or, and I'm always like, stop. It's like eventually somebody's really going to get hurt, or somebody's stacking a pallet and somebody's standing underneath it. What if it tips over? I don't know. It was, how do we keep all of that separate? So all it is forklift drivers with a roll cage over their head in case something falls, and then obviously dealing with truck drivers, which some of them tend to wander around more than they should, but not much I can do about that. So yeah, I think the flow of it, for the most part, it works. I think that if we went with the other idea of how things would arrive on one end and kind of flow through the bottling area more in a straight line and then come out the other side, is something that I've heard of people doing, but it just, for me, it was hard to figure out. And I think it would have just required even a larger building than this to accomplish that, More land, if anything, because you'd have to have docks on both sides. And I had this piece of land that I found, and I kind of had my little square, and it's like, how do I make it work here, And so this was the best way I could think to do it, and it seems to work.
So you mentioned the kind of the trust factor and people handing off their teenagers to you or whatever. Tell me about that, and what kind of how do you take it seriously? How do you make sure that you're treating their wine the way they would treat their wine, or what is kind of your method to that?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of it is, obviously I take a lot of pride and care in what I do, and I think you really have to know what you're doing. Like when I first started working with a lot of these wineries, I felt like I was being interrogated in a way. It's like, I want to see how much this guy actually knows. And I get it. This is the last step. With something that they've taken a year taken care of, where something can go wrong. I think it also, when I started, I'm 44 now, but I was, in my 20s, and most of the guys that were a cellar master at that time were twice my age. So I got a lot of this youngster over here doesn't know what he's doing, and you really just kind of had to prove that you did, and so there was a lot of that, and I think I just, like I said, taking a lot of care and showing people that, and also, getting to know people, not just, hey, I'm here, where's my, okay, there's your wine, where's my check, kind of thing. It's, people start to get to know you, and, it's just like with friends and family, you kind of start to build that trust. And yeah, I think it was definitely working through that. And then, what's sad is things have changed at some point. Even, I build this great relationship with this winemaker, but then they take off to make wine somewhere else. And the new person that shows up says, no, I'm a signature guy. Sorry, you're done here. And it's a bummer. I bottled wine there for years and years and years, but it happens, and that's a lot of that's, folks that come up from California, which we've seen a lot more of, signatures, a big thing down there. So they're used to working with them. They're used with how they do things. I'm sure it's a little different than how I do. They're also a very big company. I think they have 14 trailers. I have 2. But at one point I only had 1, and that's something I heard from a lot of people. Like, well, what if you break down, then what? Signature has another trailer they can send over, and you don't. And like, well, that's true, but or do they? Or are they all bottling right now? So yeah, it definitely took some time, and then I think, like I said, from there it was just you find these people that everyone else, especially a lot of the younger generation winemakers look up to. and you do a great job for that person, and when they speak your name, everybody's listening, then all of a sudden you're a thing, you know. So that definitely helped, you know, and being a Casteel didn't hurt, you know. I have to say my family is you know, some pioneers in the Oregon wine industry, and everybody really respects, you know, my mom, my dad, my aunt, my uncle, and still do. And so that definitely didn't hurt, you know. I don't like to think that, you know, if people bottle with me just because of that, but chances are there's probably one or two.
Speaking of the family name, you mentioned wine label that you started with your brother. Tell me about that.
So yeah, my brother and I, you know, we worked together at Rex Hill. I think it was in 2005. My dad had Parkinson's disease, you know, which is a tough one, but you know, he basically needed to retire as winemaker. And so my dad approached my older brother and asked him if he'd, you know, he's a couple years older. He was more focused on that side of the industry than I was. At the time, I think I was a little upset that I wasn't thought of, but, you know, at the same time, I was like, I get it, makes sense. Oldest son, you know, already an assistant winemaker kind of thing, but I think I was just a little more jealous that he got to work with my dad, you know. Yeah, he, you know, and years went by, obviously, and, you know, my brother and I, we used to work together at Rex Hill, and, you know, my brother's a great winemaker. He and I do tend to butt heads a lot. We're just completely different people. But, you know, being my brother, I think getting into the bottling industry, there's part of me that always missed winemaking, you know, and working harvest and doing all those things. I didn't miss all the long hours, but you know, it was a lot of fun to create something like that. And so this option was just kind of a cool thing that came up because, you know, my brother and I talked, you know, just here and there, like, man, one of these days we should start our own wine label. And we came up with the idea of calling it Terrence David, you know, which is my father's first and middle name. We couldn't really roll with the Casteel thing because, you know, Bethel Heights has the Casteel Reserve and, you know, all those sorts of things. So, but yeah, and it was a nice way to you know, show some homage to my father. And it's, we did 2000, our first vintage was 2016, and we don't produce a lot. We work with two vineyards, both Eola Amity, Filament, which is actually pretty close to my house, and it's all Pinot Noir. And then we also buy some fruit from Bjornson Vineyard, which is very close to Bethel Heights. And when we originally started, we actually made the wine at Bjornson as a custom crush client because it was not far from Bethel Heights, so my brother could shoot over the hill and do whatever. I have to admit I wasn't as much help to him as I should have been. I can't take credit for the winemaking, that's all him. But yeah, it's been fun. You know, now we work with a third vineyard, Vita Springs, and yeah, we make about, I think it's around 425 cases of wine. And we've been also fortunate that my brother, probably his least favorite part of his job, but he does a lot of marketing, and so he's traveling to the East Coast and he's all over the place, and now we make the wine at Bethel Heights as a client there, along with my cousin Mimi with her Hopewell brand. So it's nice. My brother's life is less complicated. You know, he can focus on everything in one house, and the family's been great. You know, my aunt and uncle, especially. My aunt's the president of the company, but she's just allowing us to, you know, do some of these things while he's out, you know, with his Bethel Heights hat on. So we've been very fortunate that way as well. But yeah, he's doing a great job. My brother thinks that he's not much of a speaker or a schmoozer, but, you know, he's better than he thinks he is.
I can confirm.
He knows the lingo. It's yeah.
So obviously Bethel Heights, you mentioned kind of the origin story, the two couples founding it together, and there's a lot of family involved in that, a lot of family owners. I know you're a co-owner of Bethel Heights. So tell me about how that works and sort of the future of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, you know, especially with I am obviously not very involved at Bethel Heights, but within the last couple years, they actually approached me to be on the board of directors. So I have to go to like 2 or 3 meetings a year. I think part of it was they wanted somebody kind of outside, it's still part of the family, and obviously I love that piece of land and it's home to me. But somebody that's not there day to day, they also, seeing what I've done, starting my own business, they think that I have some business sense. But it's a challenge. I even thought at one point in my life that I would go work at Bethel Heights. My brother, when he took on winemaking, he asked me like, "Hey, you can come and be my assistant winemaker and run the cellar here." And I was just kind of like, Ben, we've been there and done that, and I love the guy, but we do have a hard time working together. We're very much have our own way of doing things. So yeah, I don't think I was really built for that family working together dynamic, but it's, but, and then my cousin, Jessie, who's, my aunt and uncle's daughter, she, she's a co-owner, but she lives in Chicago, and, then my other cousin, Dee Dee, who's, Barbara's daughter, I think she's living down in San Diego now, so they come up once a year for these meetings, but as far as the day-to-day goes, it's really my brother. Now that Mimi has her Hopewell thing, and she's pretty focused on that. And, my aunt and uncle are getting up there in the years, and I think, my uncle always said he would die on his tractor, but I think maybe he's thinking one day he will retire. And my aunt has definitely been the captain of that ship. She is very good at making sure things get done, and somebody needs to grab those reins, and that's the big question, is who's going to do that. My brother, I think he could do it. It's just, I think at some point you end up wearing too many hats, and how do you keep up with all these? I think Ben thinks he can do all these things, but when they actually all end up in his lap, it may just drive him crazy. So I don't know. It's tough, but it's. One thing that I'm hopeful for is just, with what you see going on here in the Valley with a lot of big companies, especially out of California, moving up and buying a lot of these family-owned vineyards and wineries, like a lot like Bethel Heights. I'd really hate to see that happen. I'd really like to see it stay in the family. And, there's a new generation of little Casteels and Guns and Dudleys and everybody coming up, so it's like, I have 3 kids. My oldest is 12, and then I have twins that are 10. But at one point, are they going to be interested in this, or maybe they'd take some interest there? My brother has 2 daughters. My cousin has 2 daughters. My cousin Jessie has a son and a daughter that live in Chicago. But it's. Is there somebody from that generation that's going to want to, keep this thing going? That's the big question I have. I hope so. But we all like to kind of, I think Ben and Mimi and I and Jesse and everybody and Dee Dee even just all are the same way with parenting, and the way that we really want our kids to make their own decisions, My oldest son said he's going to be a bottler, and my youngest son says he's going to be a zoologist. I support both. Whatever floats your boat. At least they're thinking about their future.
So obviously, you have a pretty unique perspective on the industry.
Yeah.
Having grown up in it. So tell me about the changes you've seen in the industry. Obviously, growing up in it, you've seen a lot of changes. Tell me what the industry looks like to you now compared to when you were younger, and what are the kind of the biggest changes in Oregon wine? Yeah,
it's definitely a different crowd of people. I think growing up in the time when my father and, like I said, a lot of these guys were in the in the 80s and 90s making wine in Oregon. It was They used to do these, like, I think they still do, but it was one of the funnest things I went to was this thing they did at Steamboat. But it was kind of, they do like these fun ones that were like a Beauty and or the Beast kind of tasting, and it was a blind tasting, and you could bring the wine you're least proud of or the one you're most proud of, and then it would be brown bagged and everybody would stand up and talk about it, and it was always very entertaining as well, because it was kind of, you had the option to stand up and say that's my wine, and there's always people that would mess that up, which was always entertaining. But I think obviously there's a lot of new faces, I guess, in the industry these days. A lot of people that I don't even know and don't know me. There's people that come and bring their wine in here that, that don't know I'm the owner. And all I see them now on is on paper, or in an email. It's just a little less personal, I guess, in my opinion. But then again, we're all busy. I can't always. I'm behind the scenes a bit these days as well, just because I have a lot going on. But yeah, I do think one thing I think that is exciting is to see how many young people are interested in winemaking in the industry. It's good to see that that's still continuing to be a thing. I always thought it was amazing to me, like with my father, that he had his PhD in psychology, he finally got this job. He was a psychologist. He was driving a little red BMW and making money. And then one day, the best he could explain it to me was, he's like, "Geez, John, I just kind of got tired of listening to everybody's problems." And because I was always amazed, like, my dad went through all of this education, 8 years of college, and then to just drop all of that and take on this what if project of planting a vineyard and growing grapes and making wine in Oregon. I just felt like when I was a kid, I just looked at him and I said, "Oh, it just seems like such a waste to me, that you wasted all these years of your life to And he's like, "No, that wasn't a waste." He's like, and my dad loved academics, and he was always on councils and all kinds of things, especially kind of being somewhat of a hippie from the 60s and 70s. He loved he loved that sort of thing. But I think it's amazing to me how many folks I've met like that in the wine industry. I guess I couldn't imagine spending all these years of my life and then just saying, "Nope, I don't want to do that anymore. Now I want to do this." But in a way, I guess I'm somewhat jealous that just finding what you're passionate doing, I think was the biggest thing that I took away from that. And I think that's why a lot of people end up in the wine industry. Personally, there is some romance or passion or whatever you want to call it behind this, and it's pretty cool. But yeah, I wish I think it's exciting to see all this new generation of folks moving in, and a lot of them are also very educated, very sharp people, had some, something they used to do in their life that maybe they made a great deal of money doing or whatever it was, but they just didn't enjoy it. And that's why they're here now. And life is short, so do what you love,
So on that note, what's next for you? Obviously, you found something you're passionate about. You found something you're good at.
Yeah.
What are you looking forward to?
I don't know. That's a good question. I feel like I've spent so much time trying to build up this business to what it is, and I kind of made a deal when I built this building. That with my immediate family, just that it was kind of. Carrie, my partner, she just was like, "Geez, John, what are you going to build another building after this one, or when are you going to stop?" kind of thing. And so I kind of made a promise that this 20,000 square feet that we're in now is where I stop, and I don't have plans to build any more trailers. I really just want to focus on what I'm doing here, and I really want us to be really good at what we do. It's important to me, reputation and everything I've worked hard for. But, I think at some point, you find the right people, and you kind of end up, I'm probably going to end up in that same position in my life as I did when I had the idea to do the trucks, is I'm not somebody that sits still very long, so I don't know. I've thought a lot about it, but I think what's fun is this new project with my brother. That's something that I can focus more time on maybe as I have more time in my life, spending more time with my kids, who are growing up fast. Yeah. But yeah, who knows? I also want to keep my options open. Maybe I'll find something that I'm more passionate about. You never know.
All right. That's all the questions that I have for you. Anything I didn't ask that I should have? Anything that we didn't cover today that you'd like to cover?
I don't think so.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time, sharing your stories with us.
Yeah.
Showing us around this amazing space and enjoying this beautiful Friday morning with us. So
yeah, definitely.
Thanks so much.
Hopefully it's helpful to someone.
Absolutely. We'll let you off the hook. Thank you.